Hello, students. I'm sure you must have heard this beautiful quote that no one becomes poor on giving to others. In our English textbook, we have a beautiful poem, The Legend of Northland, which teaches us why we need to be generous. This poem is written by Fob Cary. It presents a story of an old lady who turned into a woodpecker for her greed. The legend of the old lady was popular in the Northland. A legend means a traditional story which could be known as also historical. The poet presents the story in the form of a poem so that he can impart a moral lesson. The Legend of Northland by Fob Cary. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few, and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through, where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bears' cubs in their funny furry clothes. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe it's true, and yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. Once, when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it preaching just as he did, he came to the door of a cottage in travelling round the earth where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. And being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done, he asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. Therefore, she needed another and still a similar one. But it looked, when she turned it over, as large as the first had done. Then she took a tiny scrap of dough and rolled it flat and baked it thin as wafer. But she couldn't part with that, for she said, my cakes that seem too small when I eat of them myself are yet too large to give away. So she put them on the shelf. Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint, and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. And he said, you are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, to have both food and shelter, and fire to keep you warm. Now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard, dry wood. Then up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. She had a scarlet cap on her head, and that was left the same. But all the rest of her clothes were burned black as coal in the flame. And every country schoolboy has seen her in the wood, where she lives in the trees till this very day, boring and boring for food. Let us now understand each stanza of the poem. In the first two stanzas of the poem, the poet describes the place where the story had originated. Originated means where it had begun or started. The story originated in the cold region of Northland, where the days are short and the nights are very long. The days are short there because there's hardly any sunlight, and the nights are long because it is very cold there. And this happens in winter. The people in the Northland couldn't sleep because of the extreme cold climate. When the snow falls in Northland, the people living there tie their beautiful reindeers to sledges to travel. A reindeer is an animal that is used to pull a sledge. In the Northland, the children wear warm, furry clothes that make them look like bear cubs. A bear cub is the young one of a bear. Let us now move on to the explanation of stanza 3 and 4. The third and fourth stanza of the poem tell us that in Northland the parents tell their children a story. The poet does not think that the story is true, but still tells the tale. The poet believes that it contains an important lesson which we all must learn. The poet then begins the tale. Once Saint Peter lived on earth as a human. Saint Peter is a saint or a holy man of the Catholic religion. And when he lived on this earth, he traveled the whole world teaching about God. In the fifth and the sixth stanza of the poem, while traveling around the world, Saint Peter came to a cottage door. In the cottage, a little woman was baking cakes in the fireplace. Saint Peter had been fasting for the whole day, and so he was very hungry and tired. The day was almost over, so Saint Peter asked the woman to give him a cake from her store of cakes. In the seventh and eighth stanza of the poem, the woman started baking a cake for Saint Peter, but before she could give it to him, she felt that it was too big to give it away. So the woman went to make another small cake, but when she baked it over, the cake looked as big as the first one. In the ninth and 10th stanza of the poem, the woman took a small piece of dough. Dough means the flour that has been mixed with water, and rolled it as thin as she could. The cake baked from it was as thin as a wafer. The woman could not even give that to Saint Peter. She said that her cakes seemed too small when she would eat them. However, these cakes became too large to give away for free. Consequently, she put all the cakes on the shelf and did not give Saint Peter any. In the 11th and 12th stanzas of the poem, the selfish behavior of the woman made Saint Peter angry. He was very tired and hungry. It is not easy for a compassionate and kind saint like Saint Peter to become angry, but the actions of the woman had been able to do so. Hence, Saint Peter told her that she was very selfish. She did not deserve to be a human being and live a comfortable life with good food to eat, a house to live in with fire to keep her warm. In the 13th and the 14th stanza, Saint Peter cursed the woman and transformed her into a bird. Transformed means he changed her into a bird. As a bird, the woman would now have to build her own nest and get her own food. To get food, she must dig holes into the bark of the tree, and as a result, the woman went out through the chimney of her own house, without speaking a word. She has now changed into a woodpecker. As a human, the woman wore a red cap. When she was converted into a woodpecker, only her red cap remained and all her clothes had burned. In other words, the woodpecker has a red head, but the body of the woodpecker is black. The poet says that since then, every schoolboy has seen the woodpecker, that is, the little woman in the forest. She still lives there, digging into the dry and hard wood to look for food.